Welcome to Encounter Wargaming. I'm Jay, and today we're going to be continuing our look at the second edition of Warhammer 40,000, and specifically we're going to take a look at the Dark Millenium supplement. Right, so today we are going to be going over the expansion for the second edition, the Dark Millenium supplement. Now, this book actually came in a box set that gave you a whole bunch of extra war gear cards, strategy cards, templates, as well as a lot of extra psychic powers and stuff like that. This was basically their way of expanding the second edition of the rules. So today I'm just going to show you guys the book. I know I told you guys in the last couple of videos I'd be showing you all the war gear cards and psychic cards and all that stuff, but after going through it all, I realized that there was actually a lot of it, especially all the templates and counters and various things that came in both the second edition starter set and in this Dark Millenium supplement. So I've actually come to the decision that I'm going to do all of the cards, tokens, templates, all that stuff in its own video, because I think that'll take a while. This book is not quite as thick as some of the other books we've been doing. It is actually a relatively thin one, so it probably won't take super long to go through it, but to do that plus the war gear cards is just going to make for a ridiculously long video, and I'd much rather separate it for you guys, just to get, you know, sort of the most efficiency out of it. So without further ado, let's take a look at the Dark Millenium supplement for Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition. Let's crack it open. Well, actually, let's first take a good look at that cover art. How badass is that? I find it really cool that the old school Dark Angel scheme, all the veterans had the white armor, much like the Deathwing Terminators, which is pretty cool. You can see he's actually got green armor here, and then all his other armor is white and gold, which is damn cool if you ask me. Because in Terminator armor or not, he is part of the inner circle, right? Obviously the aesthetics have changed in the game over years, and that's kind of just the evolution of the game, as it were. But it's cool to look back and see how things kind of were in the old edition. Anyway, let's flip her open and see what we got here. So as usual, we got some pictures of the old school minis. Cool. Here's the old Weird Boy. I actually have one of those in my collection. The old Swooping Hawks, which I still think are beautiful models. Bad Doc, that's funny. That's just a standard orc model. It's interesting that they have him here as a dock. And the Genestealer Magus, I actually have one of these as well, which I do plan on incorporating into my current Genestealer cult army whenever I get around to actually building and painting that army. I have enough models to almost do 2,000 points, but I haven't put them together. But anyway, that's off topic. Right here, we're going to look at this little square down here, as I usually do. So we see 1993 here. In fact, copyright 1994. So this was actually the year after the starter set came out. So they came out with the starter set, I guess. Then they came out with this Dark Millenium supplement to supplement the rules. And then they started coming out with the individual codices for the individual armies. So let's take a look at the table of contents, because this is going to tell us what we get in this supplement. So like I said, we've got an expansion on the Psyker rules, as well as the new psychic powers. We've got psychic power commentaries. That's interesting. I guess they're basically describing how all the different races' psychic powers work. We've got Eldar, Librarians, Adeptus powers, Inquisition, Weird Boy psychic powers. That's cool because, like I say, there was extra templates and things like that that weren't included in the initial starter set, which they of course incorporated into this. And they've even given the orcs their own sort of section here called Wa power, because orc psychic powers work very differently than other races' psychic powers. Unlike humans or Eldar, which have sort of control over their psychic powers, the Weird Boys more gather warp energies. In fact, the way they described it in the fluff in this edition was that it gathers in their stomach until they can't handle it anymore, and then they basically vomit out warp energy, which is so ridiculously orky. It's awesome. We've also got extra vehicle rules, so we've got rules for squadrons. Like I say, oh, I skipped over that. They've given us extra strategy cards, which is cool. So back then you had strategy cards, which added to the mission, as well as the mission you were playing. And they've given us extra vehicle data sheets and things like that, extra rules for dreadnoughts, and then alternative rules for victory points. Cool. So let's check her out. Here we go. The components that come in this set. We've got, like I say, extra strategy cards, we've got extra psychic powers, and vehicle upgrade cards that we didn't have in the other set. As well, we've got the Force deck, which I explained to you guys in the past. That's how the psychic phase worked in this edition. It literally had a deck which told you how, like, you drew these Force cards here, and you had to use those to fuel psychic powers. So say a psychic power needed the 3 Force cards, you actually had to have 3 Force cards in your hand in order to use that psychic power. And at the same time, it randomly gave you throughout the deck these nullify cards. That was the only way you could nullify a psychic power. It wasn't like it is now, where like you roll to cast the power and then the enemy gets to roll and he has to beat your number to beat it. This allowed you to actually nullify the powers, but you had to have one of these cards, otherwise you were kind of screwed. Which sort of was cool. I thought it was cool that it worked that way, but it was almost like a completely different card game on top of your miniature game. It was like one phase of the turn you were basically playing a card game on the side, which was kind of neat, but at the same time I understand why they don't do that kind of stuff anymore, because obviously they're trying to streamline and whatever, it is what it is. So now here also they've given you extra counters for various things. We've got virus, rad grenades, traps you could set up, and I find it interesting they give you these faction counters as well. I suppose you could use to represent whatever you want. There's the Orc Psychic template I was talking about, the Crunch, which is literally like you summon one of the gods to like step on a unit, which was awesome. I used to use it all the time. We got some Eldar templates, Machine Curse and Hellfire rounds, Death Wave, which was another Orc Psychic power, and then we've got the Gate, which is kind of neat. That was actually a Grey Knight Psychic power, if I remember correctly, and then just some extra smaller templates. These are like, these templates here are like your little 2-inch template, and then the Blast was a 3-inch, and then we had the 5-inch Ordnance. They'd done away with all these little tiny templates in 3rd edition and just changed it to the 3-inch, the 5-inch, and the Flamer. As I was explaining to you before, in 2nd edition you actually had a Hand Flamer template, which was small, a Flamer template, which was your standard Flamer template we're used to seeing nowadays, and then the Heavy Flamer one, which was even longer. It was just this massive flame template, and I'll show you guys all those in the next video. Like I say, I'm trying to keep this as organized as possible, so today we're just going to go through the book, and then next time I will show you guys all the templates and counters and all that crazy stuff. But being a bibliophile myself, I like to focus on the books, because this is kind of the, I guess the cool part of looking back. Regardless, here we go. So we've got the Warp. Like I say, this supplement really focused on expanding the psychic power rules, so that's kind of where they want to start you off. We've got rules for determining which psychic powers you're using, as well as dealing with psychic powers, the number of powers you can use. There you go. So a Mastery Level 1 Psyker can use 1 power, Mastery Level 2, 2 powers, 3, 3, and 4, 4, respectively. Moving on. Dealing your deck. Primary disciplines, tertiary disciplines, that's interesting. And here we go, it tells you what everyone has access to. So there you go, Space Marine Librarians have access to Librarian powers as well. They can access Inquisition and Adeptus powers. The Grey Knights, of course, Inquisition powers, but they can also access Librarian and Adeptus powers, making sense. The Primaris Psychers only get Adeptus powers and don't get any options for any others. Squat Ancestors, of course, have a squat powers of their own, but then they can also access Adeptus powers, which kind of makes sense because they are humans. In a way, they are abhumans. Orcs only get access to Orc powers, obviously, making sense, and Eldar only get access to Eldar powers. Now, Chaos Magus is different than a Chaos Demon, and like I say, they didn't have sorcerers per se yet. We looked through the Codex Imperialis, seeing that there were really only Chaos Maguses. which I believe are like sort of human psychers rather than space marine psychers. So I imagine that's something they added when the Chaos Codex came out, is my only explanation there. Of course, when I started playing the game, it was sort of mid to end 2nd edition. It was a few years. I think I started playing in '96, so this came out the year before I started playing. And at that time, the Chaos Codex was out, and it was like this massive codex. I'll show you guys all the codices in future videos, but I just wanted to say that things obviously operated a little bit different. Tyranids, of course, and Genestealer Patriarchs get access to the Tyranid powers, and for some reason Genestealer Maguses get access to Adeptus powers, which actually, again, I guess kind of makes sense based on the fact that they are human psychers that have chosen to side with the Genestealers rather than the Imperium. Moving on, we've got the Psychic Phase. So this is basically expanding the rules for the Psychic Phase, telling you how the Psychic Phase works, how to use those Force cards, and etc. that I was talking about. I won't get into too much detail on that today, even though that is the bulk of this book, because like I say, it would take too long to read you guys all this stuff, but we are just kind of taking a look at what this edition was all about. And as always, some cool John Blanche artwork. Just a badass looking librarian with like a Grey Knight Terminator hanging out behind him. Love John Blanche's artwork. It's so grimdark. Amazing. Yep, there's another cool piece of an Eldar Farseer. Love it. So here it's explaining to you all the special cards that come in the Force deck. Like I say, most of them were Force cards. In the Warp deck, sorry, I should say. Most of them were Force cards, which were used to fuel your psychic powers. Like I say, if you had a psychic power that needed 3 Force to cast, you needed to actually have 3 Force cards in your deck, and you had to lay them down and be like, I'm going to cast blah 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 with these cards. And then there are plenty of ways for people to get around it, but again, they would have to have drawn one of these cards in their hand. Kind of adds a nice randomness to the Psychic Phase. And like I say, it almost makes it its own card game aside from the normal game. So nullify, that would just be nullifying powers. Destroy, I guess just stops that psyker from using that power altogether. If you decide to use this and the psychic power against your cellular models within 6 inches of psychers, this card can be played immediately and prevented from taking effect. Power is instantly and automatically nullified. Alternatively, you can keep the destroyed power card in your hand. Yeah, of course. So nullify, I believe you actually had to roll in order to kill the power, whereas this one is just like straight, yeah, that power's dead. Energy drain, I suppose you could take away their force. Reflection, shooting the power back at them, that's pretty cool. And then demonic attack, a demon could always eat your head. Psychic duel, you could literally battle with other psychers, which later on they actually made that psychic power for certain races, but in this edition anyone could do it. And ultimate force, I believe, is just one of those things that just can't be stopped. If you use that, you cast the power successfully and it just can't be nullified or destroyed, if I remember correctly. Cool, so we've got examples of a Psychic Phase. They're just running you through a scenario here just to sort of give you an example of how things work. They used to do that a lot back then, simply because, like I say, the rules in this edition were very granular, at least compared to the streamlined system we have nowadays, and so they really tried to give you examples where they could to try and explain it to people. Especially because we started playing this game, I was like 11 years old or so, and so it took us a while to get our brains wrapped around the rules, but once we did, we used to have a lot of fun, actually. Moving on. Descriptions of psychic powers, drawing line of sight, strikes the first model on its path, irresistible force and immovable objects, that's interesting. Other psychic attacks, cool. Ranges, yeah, just kind of giving you the idea of how everything works. Armor save modifiers, rolling under characteristics, so we're used to kind of seeing that up until our current 8th edition. You know, a toughness test would be rolling under your toughness, an initiative test would be rolling under your initiative. They kind of done away with that kind of stuff, but whatever, it is what it is. Break tests, how that affects it. Powers that remain in play, as well as powers that affect hand-to-hand combat, because even back in this edition you couldn't shoot into hand-to-hand combat. Or maybe you could and it was randomized. I'll have to look into that, but if I remember correctly, I don't think you could shoot into hand-to-hand combat, but maybe Chaos and Orcs and things would actually be able to, whereas other races would actually be careful. Vehicle rules. So, like I say, we're also expanding on the vehicle rules. So that's interesting. Vehicle hit locations, yep. Bonus penetration dice. Vehicle, yeah, each location has its own armor rating. We've been through all this in past videos. Cool. So it's just actually explaining further the actual psychic powers that they give you in the set. We are outlining the Eldar powers, Librarian powers, Adeptus powers. Sweet. Inquisition, Weird Boy powers, yeah. So they're literally telling you each of the powers that they've given you. Slanesh, Tzeentch, Nurgle, Squats, Tyranids. Awesome. That is a cool looking picture of a mage right there. Genestealer Magus, I should say. He's almost got like a Pope hat. He's like shooting energy out of his hands. Coolness. Wah powers. Now, like I say, they differentiated the Orcs quite a bit in the way that they use psychic powers as compared to other races. And this is basically explaining that. And there you go. Much like nowadays how Orcs get +1 for every 10 Orcs. +1 to their roll for every 10 Orcs that are near them. In this edition it was kind of the same thing, because you got to understand that Orcs generate psychic energy as there is more of them. And so literally your Weird Boys became more powerful based on how many models were around them. So any number of Gretchen, it doesn't matter because they don't really supply as much warp energy as Orcs do. You get 1 power. If you have up to 5 Orcs, you get 2 powers. Up to 10 Orcs, you get 3 powers. And 10 or more Orcs, you get 4+. Any hand-to-hand combat in the preceding phase of the battlefield gives you another +2 for your mastery level, not for how many powers you get. Which is pretty neat, actually. So that means as you have more guys on the field, your Weird Boys are more powerful, which totally makes complete sense for Orcs. Awesome. The benefits of WA power. Ed Banger table, there you go. I remember having to roll on a table to see what happens, because using Psychers is random and problematic in this edition, and being an Orc Psyker is even more random and problematic. And as I explained before, your Warpheads, or Weird Boys as they're called, Warpheads I think are the upgraded Weird Boy, they actually had to have Minders, which were Orcs that hung out with them to make sure that they didn't like freak out or explode or whatever. So here we've got the stat line for, as well as the point values for your Warphead. Cool. With his Minders, 194 points. Crazy. Remember guys, totally different point system. When they came out with 3rd, they literally like halved all the point values. Which in my opinion is a great marketing ploy, because it means that you have to buy twice as many models. Good old Games Workshop. And it seems like it's just been increasing since, actually. I remember in 7th edition playing 2,000 point games and realizing that they were like 2 to 3 times the number of models that we used back in 2nd. So now we're getting into Grey Knight Terminators. So back here we didn't have the Demon Hunter rules yet. In 3.5 they expanded into a full Demon Hunter Codex. But back in this edition, the only Grey Knights you saw were Terminators. There wasn't any Power Armor dudes, there wasn't Dread Knights and things like that. It was just your Grey Knight Terminators, which could be added to your Imperial Force, whether that be Imperial Guard or Space Marines or what have you. And they were all Psychers. I mean, they were basically librarians, right? Terminator librarians is more or less what they were. Entire units of Terminator librarians, which is pretty badass if you ask me. So we've got here the point values for having a Grey Knight Terminator. And of course going up in mastery levels. So even your mastery level 1 is 350 points. Crazy, right? Mastery level 4 is 425 points. You gotta remember, in these days, guys, people used to call it Hero Hammer for a reason, because literally your characters were like a massive part of your army, and as you can see, they were actually a massive points investment. you could actually have up to 50% of your points in characters, which was insane by today's standards. But the way it was nonetheless. So it was really about souping up your characters and just having some badass dudes running around the battlefield. Cool. A couple pages of fluff. Brother Captain Stern. Interesting. Cool. Again, won't be reading you the fluff today. If you guys want, could possibly do fluff in the future, but for right now, we're just really looking back, getting some nostalgia from this. So here we go. We got Demon Psychers, which is neat. Keeper of Secrets is a Mastery Level 4, so yeah, your Greater Demons are all Mastery Level 4, and they have access to their God Disciplines, of course. And then we've even got Demonette Mastery Levels, Plague Bearing. Oh, Horrors. Interesting. Only pink horrors count. So that's interesting that even basic demon units had access to their psychic disciplines, which totally makes perfect sense, actually, that all demon units would be psychers. And the more of them you have in the unit, the more mastery levels they get, which is totally logical. So moving on from psychics, we've got now the new strategy cards they've given us. Well, I shouldn't say new, because all this stuff is ancient, but back then you had your mission, which had its objectives, of course, and its storyline behind it. And then you had strategy cards, which you could use to sway the battle in your favor. And the strategy cards, I believe, were randomly drawn. I might be wrong. I don't know if you could select them or if you had to randomly draw them, but every army had a strategy rating. So if I recall correctly, I think Space Marines had a strategy rating of 3, and I think Orcs had a strategy rating of 1 or 2. You know what I mean? So literally the Space Marine player would get 3 strategy cards that could help his army on the battlefield, whereas the Orc player would only get 2. Logical, right? Space Marines would be a little more strategic. And then we've got the extra vehicle squadron rules, support weapon battery rules. Here it's just showing some squad coherency sort of rules for vehicle squadrons. So here it's showing a bunch of Orc buggies, and obviously 6 inches from each other is good, whereas 8 inches is too far. 2 inches for infantry, I guess 6 inches for squadrons makes total sense. In later editions they made it 4 inches for squadrons, they had to be within 4 inches of each other. Tomato, really. Troops, transports, and bike squadrons. Yep, they have to maintain coherency, travel together. Unipsychology and do not take brake tests. Yeah, I guess all vehicles would be in unipsychology. I could be wrong there though. Coherency rules, cool. So now we're expanding on the vehicle cards as well. So like I say, back then every vehicle had data fax is what they called it, not a data slate. It was a data fax back then. And that told you all the locations and the armor values for various locations as well. They each had a separate damage table for each location. So you're shooting at an Orc buggy, you have to roll to see where you hit. You hit the crew, did you hit the engines, did you hit the wheels, did you hit the hull, you know what I mean? And then each one of those would have a separate armor rating. On top of that, each one would have a separate damage table. So if you hit the engine, you could blow up the engine, whereas if you hit the crew, you could kill one of the crew, right? And then later on, they made it just in 3rd edition and 4th edition, and 5th, 6th, 7th, they made it just 1 damage table that was used for, or 2 damage tables, I think, actually, because there was a separate one for glancing and a separate one for penetrating, whereas in later, like closer to 7th, they made it just 1 damage table for every vehicle in the game. And now they've just done away with all that, and vehicles just have toughnesses and wounds, just like everybody else. But back here, we actually had a separate damage table for each location on the vehicle, which is just absolutely nuts. But it is the way it is, right? Moving on. Oh, this is interesting to note. Point values for various weapons. Just take a look at this. Assault cannon was 45 points. A battle cannon was 55 points. Crazy. Heavy plasma gun, heavy stubber, shuriken cannon. Shuriken catapults 5 points. Storm bolters 4 points. It's actually not too off from nowadays. I mean, what's a las cannon now? 25 points, and a Stormbolter's 4, so that actually makes total sense. Stormbolter might be 2 for most races nowadays. Cool. And we are getting additional rules for Space Marine Dreadnoughts, which is pretty neat. Obviously, it depends on what they're armed with. They're giving you different rules for their weapons. Giving Dreadnought armor with a twin-link las cannon, rolls to hit normally. D6 against the location. Is that allowed +1 or -1 on that location? That's neat. So he has a better chance of choosing. Cool. Power Fists, what they do. Neat. And victory points. Now, this is where it started to really get granular when you were trying to decide who won the battle. It wasn't just kill points for like kill a unit, you get a point. Or even in 3rd edition, it was like if you killed 50% of the squad, you got 50% of their points. If you killed them completely, you got 100% of their point values. Here's a very different system than either one of those. You actually get different victory points depending on what kind of units you killed. So, there you go. Based on the point value of said unit. So in the case of killing characters here, if you kill a 300 point character, you got 4 victory points. If you kill a 50 point character, you got 0 victory points. Making sense, right? That little Imperial Guard Colonel is not nearly as important as a Grey Knight Terminator. Same thing, squads. Different. For killing squads, you get a different victory point table. For killing vehicles, support weapon batteries, etc. So, it really depended on what you wanted to focus on, and killing more high priority targets logically got you more victory points. Ooh, let's take a second and stare at that. That is a wicked cool John Blanche piece. I'm not even entirely sure what I'm looking at here. It looks very much like a demon. Yep, probably a Tzeentch demon, because I see some marks of Tzeentch here on the skulls. A little bird skull. He's got the cool hat, sort of like Magnus does nowadays. Badass looking demon chain axe, and he's directly fighting an Inquisitor, which is neat. Coolness. I assume that's explained in the story, and once again, I won't go over the fluff, I'm just going over the book with you guys today. Wow. And in fact, that is it. As per usual in these days, they used to give you sort of snippets from their catalog in the backs of most of the books. So look at these old bikes, guys. I actually have a bunch of the old plastic bikes, which didn't really get updated until 5th edition, actually, the current Orc plastics. They used the old plastics from the Gorka Morka set up until then, which is just insane, because they even still, to this day, the War Buggy and the War Track are the old plastics from the Gorka Morka set. I really hope when they come out with a new Orc book this year that they come out with some new models, because we definitely need some updated models. But regardless, these are the pewter models from back in Rogue Trader, and just take a good look at this. Crazy, right? Now this is something to note. Your knobs bikes back in Rogue Trader and in 2nd edition was actually a dude riding a bike, and the knob would hang out on the bike, because the knob's not going to ride his own bike. He's going to hang out and he's going to get somebody else to drive it for him, right? He's the boss. He's going to stand back and shoot his gun and fight stuff while the other guy drives. Cool. That is so cool, actually. And all that was just an extra seat that they added on to the standard pewter kit instead of the guns, in the place of where the guns would be. Neat. So clearly they've expanded the Orc line quite a bit at this point. Here we go. There's the Minders I was talking about. So you literally have them. Look at this one. This one. That is hilarious, right? I'm actually going to hold that a little closer for you guys. You literally have the Minders holding the weird boy like a cannon in order to fire his powers out. This one, they're just literally like holding him up, stopping him from freaking out while he scratches his head because he can't handle the freaking powers. Awesome. And then these are the old school weird boys. So cool. I actually have one of the older weird boys in my current orc army, which is actually not depicted on this page, if you can believe it. Interesting, okay. And they actually had clan-specific weird boys, which I didn't remember back then. But that's pretty cool. Ooh, the old Gazkal model. Hilarious, right? With Nakari, his little standard bearer. I actually had this Goth boss, which I used to use as my orc war boss back in the day. Not sure if I still have him. I might have him kicking around somewhere. In fact, it would be fun at one point to just pull out all my old second ed orcs and just paint them up to my current talents and not my 11-year-old talents. But anyway, I got enough projects on the go. So let's keep looking at, there you go, there's the Grey Knight Terminators. So as you can see, drastically different from the standard Librarian Terminators. And in fact, even the Chaos Terminators. Wow. Those look silly. Look at this skull face. And the weapons. It's just silly. By today's standards. But there's your old Grey Knights. As you can see, they have sort of that weird, different helmet, which was quite different than the Librarian Terminators at the time. And of course, they had that force weapon with the bolter built into it. Nemesis force weapons. Yeah, there you go. Nemesis Greatsword, Nemesis Force Halberd. Demon Sword, Power Sword, Chain Fist. Cool. Wow, that is the smallest heavy flamer I've ever seen. Psy Cannon Arm. Cool. So these are your Inquisitor Terminators, which were different than your Grey Knight Terminators, even though they are Inquisition. And of course, all these beauties are sculpted by Jess Goodwin. I'm not sure if he's even still around, but most of the stuff back then was sculpted by him. So praise to Mr. Goodwin for all the models that I remember from back in the day. The old metal Eldar Dreadnought, as it was called, which is now known as a Wraith Lord. Again, actually, I still have one of these to this day, which I converted up for my Exodite army. Another one of my armies, which never got completed, and I would love to put on the battlefield at some point. But again, I have plenty of stuff in the queue to get done first. The old Eldar Warwalker. In fact, these Warlocks and Farseers, I believe, are still legit. Not sure this guy still exists, and they did do alternative sculpts in like 3rd and 4th edition, but they kind of stuck to the original aesthetic, unlike other races where they've changed the aesthetic over time. The Eldar sort of maintained their aesthetic, which is great because these old models I think are absolutely beautiful, especially in comparison to a lot of the stuff that was around in 2nd edition. These old Warlocks are just as appropriate in an Eldar army today. In fact, I wouldn't mind getting my hands on a few of them. I think I might actually have this guy somewhere kicking around. Yeah, I think I got that guy in my Eldar army somewhere. I'll have to dig him out and check. But I love the old school models. There's the old plastic Land Raider. Crazy. That model actually came out in Rogue Trader, which is really neat. And then they even discontinued it before 3rd dropped. So there was a while there where you actually couldn't even get a Land Raider kit. And then they came out with what is actually our current Land Raider at the beginning of 3rd edition, if you can believe it or not. So it's almost been like 20 years since that current Land Raider kit came out. Now obviously they've added to it, because the only thing that existed in 3rd was the standard, what we call the God Hammer pattern of Land Raider with the las cannons and heavy bolters. Of course they've added to it, they have now the Crusader and various other patterns. But at the time, in 3rd edition, that Land Raider kit was actually the largest plastic model kit that Games Workshop had ever produced. Now, of course, we have things like Baneblades and Lords of Skulls and Stompas. The Stompa is freaking huge. But back in the day, when did 3rd come out? 99 maybe? 98? That was the largest plastic model kit that they had ever produced. Because this one that they produced before, if you actually hold it up next to the current Land Raider, it looks tiny. Same with the old plastic Rhinos. They look ridiculously small in comparison to the current Rhino kit. And of course, The old Predator with its badass rounded sponsons and turret. Again, looks silly in comparison to the current Predator kit, but I like how when they started doing the Horus Heresy stuff, that they actually came out with the Deimos Predator and gave it that round turret, as well as the missile launchers. They made the sort of Rogue Trader aesthetic, even though they were current sculpts. Just awesome that they brought back that sort of element of the fluff, because people actually started to use Rogue Trader models in their 30k armies the same way I currently do. Actually, my Scorpius is that old like crayon launcher Whirlwind. Looks like it's firing like 10 crayons at you, which is cool. But that's why I think they went back to that aesthetic, to make it not only look older, but also to make it legit if somebody actually wanted to use Rogue Trader models in their Horus Heresy army. And there is the Blood Angel Pewter Dreadnought. Awesome, which is a massive step up from the Rogue Trader Dreadnoughts with that silly face on it that I've been showing you guys in a couple of the past videos. This kit is what the current plastic kits are based on. I used to remember people had these back in the day, and the thing was literally a paperweight. Like, it was just a block of pewter. But what a cool model, even to this day. I actually wouldn't mind getting my hands on a few of those pewter dreadnoughts from back in the day, because personally I just love having pewter models. I love the weight. I love moving heavy models around the table, especially large models like that. It just feels really cool having a metal army. Of course, nowadays everything is resin or plastic, but I am an old head, and so having a pewter models, just to me, feels cool. So looking at the old heavy metal paint schemes here, we've actually got a couple of the squat models, which is neat. I like seeing those because you don't see those anymore. Of course, the race was taken out of the game in 3rd and has never been spoken of since. They came up with some stupid fluff, like all the Tyranids ate all the squat homeworlds or something like that. I don't know, it's just silly. But another one of those armies, I did myself convert up a squat army for 6/7th, and then got about halfway through converting it and decided it was a lot of work and put it aside for other armies that I wanted to update for 6th and 7th. And now we're looking at 8th, so I guess at some point I'm going to have to go back to that, but that's a side note. There's the Eldar Farseer, the old Eldar Warlocks. Here we've got a Goth Knob. I think I got a couple of those in my possession. The old Harlequin models, which still to this day I think are amazingly cool. I mean, obviously the new ones are much more dynamic and stuff like that, but the old ones are still really good looking. And really silly looking at the same time. And finally the back cover, take a look at that. Zoom in a bit for you dudes and dudettes. Look at that army. Now by today's standards, that's even a large army. Guaranteed, back then, that was a massive army. Like, you were to look at this and go, holy crap, that's a lot of Marines. And really it's only like 80 Marines. But that would be Ultramarines and Blood Angels allied together. Coolness. Interesting, the Dreadnought's on a square base. Because I believe even back then this pewter Dreadnought didn't have to be on a base at all. Much like vehicles, no vehicles actually had bases. And you'll notice that even the Terminators are on 25mm bases, not 40s as they are now. Everybody there is on a 25. Except for the Dreadnought, which is on a square base, which is really weird. But I guess if the base didn't matter, then you could put it on any friggin' base you really wanted to. Because it's not supposed to have a base. Mighty Warriors of the Ultramarines and Blood Angels, Space Marine chapters. Cool. And again, everything's flock green. Just green flock everywhere. Bright colors. The silliness of 2nd. The good old days. So there it is. That's the Dark Millenium supplement for the 2nd edition of Warhammer 40,000. So I hope you all enjoyed that look at the Dark Millenium. This was your expansion for Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition, and what a blast from the past it was. Like I say, guys, I would like to show you guys all of the additional war gear cards, strategy cards, psychic cards, all that stuff, the templates, the counters, all that stuff's a great blast from the past, lots of nostalgia there for myself, and I hope for you all too. Again, I'm going to put all those in their own video, so that'll likely be the next one in this series before we start getting into all the codices for this edition of Warhammer 40k. So thanks for watching. If you like these videos, or you like any of our other videos, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, because that goes a long way to help us, as well hit that little bell notification so that you will be notified whenever our videos come out. Also, if you want to help support what we do here at Encounter Wargaming, please head to the description below. Check out our Patreon campaign. In there is a whole bunch more bonuses for you guys. For as little as $1, you get access to all our normal video content, so these videos early. We also have a whole bunch of other bonuses for you guys, including 10% off thewarpainter.com, a great Canadian supplier of painting brushes, Scale 75, Vallejo, Broken Toad, all that stuff that's kind of hard to find in other shops. And being a patron of Encounter Wargaming will get you 10% off. As well, it gets you a whole bunch of other bonuses, and I don't want to go over it all right now because they're all listed on the page. Alternatively, if you just want to give us a one-off donation or something like that, you can actually go to our Spreadshirt page, which is also in the description below, and buy a t-shirt. It's not a massive money grab for us, but it gets you guys a t-shirt and gets us a couple of bucks. Yep, other than that, keep watching. I will come out with a lot more of these Relics videos in the future because I love showing off my old collection, and I just love looking at the old stuff because it brings me back to my childhood, and I hope you guys are excited about it as I am. So we will see you at our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a rocket on his way back home. Okay.